Welcome to the UX Consultants Lounge. I'm Kyle Susi, founder of Usable Interface, an independent UX research consultancy. You can find out more about my work and the services I offer at my website, usableinterface.com. I'll be your host here at the lounge, where I'll be providing a place for UX consultants to gather, share stories, and learn more from one another. This is it, the last episode of 2025, and I have a real treat for all of you. It's not every day you get to hear the firsthand story of a UX consultant who started a successful agency, grew it to over 70 people in 2 different office locations, and then got acquired. Today on the UX Consultants Lounge, I'm joined by someone who has been part of my UX journey for a very long time, Amy Heymans. Amy and I first met back in 2006 when I had just moved from Philadelphia to New Hampshire. And at the time, she was in the first few years of building Mad Pow, which would soon become one of the most influential UX agencies in the area. But what makes today's conversation especially powerful is what came after the success. In 2019, Mad Pow was acquired, which is the dream scenario for many agency founders. Yet, as Amy and I discuss, the quote-unquote big exit isn't always what people imagine. She shares openly about the financial reality behind acquisitions, the emotional upheaval that came with letting go of her company, and how personal circumstances shaped her next chapter. After the acquisition, Amy stepped into a prestigious role as Chief Design Officer at United Healthcare, a huge shift from running a 70-person consultancy to navigating a 400,000-person corporation. And if you know Amy, you won't be surprised that corporate life wasn't a long-term match. 11 months later, she walked away and began rebuilding her career on her own terms. Today, Amy is the founder of Beneficent, a consultancy focused on systems thinking, futures design, and complex problem solving. She's also the co-founder of the Dignified Futures Conference, a gathering dedicated to reimagining systems for social impact, and she'll share more about that work today. We cover a lot in this episode: how Mad Pow really started, the messy truth behind scaling a design agency, the realities of selling a firm, financially, emotionally, and personally, why returning to corporate wasn't the answer for Amy, how she built Beneficent and what she's doing differently this time, how Amy's ADHD shows up as both a challenge and a superpower, and how UX consultants can adapt and thrive in the age of AI and futures thinking. This is an unusually candid conversation about success, identity, reinvention, and what it really looks like to lead a career over decades through downturns, acquisitions, personal shifts, and changing technology. So settle in. I think you're going to get a lot out of this one. Please enjoy Amy Heymans. All right, Amy, welcome to the lounge.
Thanks for having me. It's good to see you, as always.
Good to see you too, and I'm so glad that you were able to do this. I have been looking forward to this conversation for a long time. We have a long history together, so bear with me while I give a brief background to the listeners here about us. So you and I met in 2006, and you had started a UX design agency called Mad Pow at the time. I believe you were a few years into that. And it was just 2 or 3 other people with Mad Pow at the time that I met you. And we worked together around that time to also start the New Hampshire chapter of UXPA, because there were no meetups or anything at all going on in New Hampshire, and we wanted to change that. But over the next 13 years, I got to watch Mad Pow grow into a 70-plus person agency with offices in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and Boston, Massachusetts. and you started putting on events, and you created the Health Experience Design Conference, HXD, the Center for Health Experience Design, and the Financial Experience Design Conference. And during this time, I was fortunate enough to subcontract on and off with Mad Pow. So I got to see a lot of that growth from the inside. And I mean, just up to that point alone, you've had quite a journey. And what makes this conversation, I think, really interesting and valuable for the consultants listening is what happened next. Because Mad Pow did what a lot of agency owners only dream about. You got acquired in 2019. And that's, quote unquote, making it in a lot of people's eyes. But you've been really open with me in our private conversations about what that actually looked like. The financial reality, the personal circumstances, what happens after the dream scenario plays out. And you were willing to come on here and talk about it honestly, which I think is incredibly valuable for the consultants listening. So we have a lot to talk about, and I want to hear about the Mad Pow journey, what the acquisition was really like, what's happened since then, and spoiler to those listening, you went back to work internally for United Healthcare for a brief moment, found out corporate wasn't working, and you started a new company and a conference that I want to hear all about, and really just discuss the lessons you've learned along the way. So let's start at that beginning. If you could take us back to 2002, you were just starting Mad Pow. What drove you to start a UX design agency in the first place?
Oh, gotcha. During the dot-com boom, I worked at an agency in the Portsmouth area called MicroArts and made a lot of friends there. Great work culture there, great people. And that was when the dot-com boom was happening. So we were building websites. We were designing the interwebs, so to speak, back then. And I founded the UX department there, and I met who ended up being my business partner at Mad Pow there, as well as who ended up being our COO and another partner there. And we ended up hiring a lot of people from MicroArts to Mad Pow over the years. But yeah, early days, the dot-com bubble had burst. I was laid off and started freelancing just to pay the bills. And it just so happens that Will, my business partner, had also been freelancing to pay the bills. And we partnered up on a project. The first project we worked on together, I was 9 months pregnant, about to go into labor. And I was like, well, dude, they're not going to hire some lady about to have a baby for this big project, a big call center redesign for Starwood Hotels, now Marriott. So I said, let's go for this together, pretend we're a company. And he had the brand, he had the website, the insurance, the bank account, all the things that I hadn't built up yet as a freelancer. So we went for it as Mad Pow. We won the work. We worked on that project for 2 years. And then we got another project, started building a stable of contractors to do the work. Awesome people like yourself who are around the area. And we grew from there. So we hired our first employee in 2006. He was actually in business development. So where we went from networking and personal connections, we started to do cold calling and business development and grew from there.
I can't believe it started from let's pretend we're a company to what it actually grew to. That's really amazing. And that growth, 70 plus people and all that time, what surprised you the most about just growth and scaling that really no one warns founders about?
Sure. And again, the growth, part of business is luck, it's timing, it's market dynamics. I mean, there's so much a successful business, yeah, they probably did some stuff right, but businesses that don't end up growing and thriving probably did stuff right too. So it's not the people who are able to grow and scale are smarter than those who don't. Number one, is it even a good idea for work-life balance or anything like that? But that aside, say both founders have the intention. It may work out for one and not the other. And it's not anything they did or didn't do. It's just straight up luck.
I appreciate you actually saying that it was more luck or that it could be, an element
Yeah,
of that.
we did some stuff right, but we also made a ton of mistakes. So the market conditions at the time, because what design figures out how to apply technology to human and business problems. So at the time where the internet was being built, there was a ton of business to be had. There was a ton of design needed because it was an explosion in technology, right? So
Yeah.
that was a fortunate time for sure.
What worked well for you guys to grow and what was harder than you imagined?
Well, we started with subcontractors, which I think is a smart thing to do because you don't want to take on a salary if you have volatility in your revenue, right? There needs to be predictability in revenue in order to take on that responsibility. And it is a responsibility. What really drove me was like, loving the people I worked with because they were brilliant and passionate, but also they had families and depended on their livelihood. Working at Mad Pow fed their families and paid their mortgage. And so that created a lot of responsibility to continue to have stable revenue. Now, in order to have stable revenue, I believe you have to constantly be growing because if you're not growing, you are stagnating or shrinking. And so that constant pro growth mentality led to our growth. Now, there's different chasms to cross and whatnot. So going from 5 people to 20 is a big leap. Going from 20 to, I think we had 70 or 80 at the peak is a
Wow.
big leap. And we always used to talk about responsible growth, like my partners and I, because I'd be like, let's grow, and they'd be like, we want to grow responsibly, but it's hard to know culture changes. Things will be different. You need more infrastructure, you need more operations, HR and accounting, and look after culture and all the things. But sometimes it happens so organically and imperceptibly that it's not until you experience a pain or a frustration that you notice, oh, we've changed. Like for me, it
Mhm.
was when I walked into Mad Pound, I saw a new employee and I didn't know their name and I didn't even know we hired them.
Oh,
Whereas
wow. Yeah.
before, I knew everybody and participated in the interviewing process. So scale can be surprising. Folks say always be aware of your blind spots. It's hard to be aware of something you're blind of, but I think constantly having an attitude of humility and hearing from folks is really important to form your opinion, but also people will tell you a ton of things that aren't necessarily true in general or for you and your business. So simultaneously knowing what's important to you while also like getting feedback from people who have some good advice and wisdom.
I can only imagine how much you must have to trust your leadership team when it gets to a point of not being able to know every single hire. Like it's just not even possible. What did you learn about hiring and leadership and trusting your team during that period?
Yeah. So, first of all, we had first it was my business partner, myself, so two partners, and we took on another partner, and then we took on another partner. So we had four partners, and that was a great dynamic because we approached things with very different mindsets, which I think leads to improved quality. I'm a big fan of creative abrasion. You don't want to have just everybody agreeing with everybody. You could quickly go off the rails that way. Like I mentioned, I was pro growth and my business partners were more like operationally minded, like slow and steady wins the race. And so we balanced each other out really well. When it came to hiring, we would do group interviewing or have like multiple people interview. We had to be aware though of like confirmation bias really bit us. And so we learned about it after we had already made mistakes associated with it. So for example, if my business partner interviewed somebody and was like, "Oh, they're awesome, you're going to love them." I would assume that I'm going to love them and I wouldn't be as well in that regard. So we definitely had some very interesting experiences over the years with regard to that. Yeah.
Oh, that is interesting. I can see how that would be a benefit to have people that don't exactly yep you constantly. They're willing to
Right.
give their input, their honest input, and the responsibility. You mentioned that being an independent consultant, never having employees, I cannot imagine what it must be like to have the responsibility to feed other people and keep them employed. What was that like? Is that something that fuels you, or is it just amp the pressure? I just can't even imagine.
No, it's good to have external pressure like accountability, deadlines, and just your social contract or the responsibility and ethic you have as a business owner. There's a great responsibility that comes with providing people jobs. But at the same time, they're adults and they go, it used to be that when someone would quit, I felt like they dumped me. I felt like I got punched in the gut. Like you feel like when,
Sure.
through a breakup or what have you. But then, I'd have employees going like, "I'm moving to London to work for Google." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, they're living their best lives." And it's so great because Mad Pow was a part of their journey. And then there
Mhm.
became this notion of Mad Pow alumni, like going and changing the world. And Mad Pow folks still work together. there's these like different bands of Mad Powers at like different places. So yes, it's a huge responsibility. What motivated me though was like working with brilliant people and being able to like trade ideas, and this notion of, "Oh, we're a tiny company in New Hampshire, but we can do things that impact the world. We can work for the biggest brands." And just like raw creativity, ingenuity and stuff. I found it extremely rewarding and motivating. So I'd rather do stuff for other people than for myself. And I don't know if that's a good trait, but it definitely was motivating for me.
I mentioned earlier about all the conferences that Mad Pow put
Mm.
on, which was just a huge feat. And from my perspective, these weren't just marketing conferences and an opportunity for you to market yourselves as a firm. They became genuine community building efforts. And I was curious what drove you to invest in that kind of work alongside running the agency?
Yeah, sure. It's a little bit of risk taking, a little bit of hubris, a little bit of problem with authority or liking to break the rules. For example, I would go to HIMSS, like the biggest conference in health, or I would go to IXDA or UXPA. And what I noticed was there wasn't a lot of design at the health conferences, and there wasn't a lot of health at the design conferences. And so I said, what about designers in health? Like they need content to nourish them too. And I was talking to somebody about it over lunch, and they were like, you should do a health conference. And I was like, yeah, maybe we should. And so we did. And it was scary because with event planning, it's even worse than running a business. Like it's more detailed, and you put in all this effort and this outright cash outlay, outright expense, and you don't know if anybody's going to buy a ticket. But the first year people came, and I think it ended up costing as much as like a fancy event sponsorship would have cost. But the difference was we could leverage that event to, yes, stimulate interesting conversations, feature great content, but also to give a platform to our employees for them to share their thought leadership and gain confidence and build their brand, and for our clients to start to speak about the good work they're doing and hopefully say a good thing about us when they're on stage, and to prospects, like for us to invite the kind of people we want to do business with to the conference to build a relationship. And so it ended up serving us in terms of brand awareness, credibility, thought leadership, relationship building, lead generation, and it really fueled our growth to the extent that we were like, okay, this worked for health. Let's do it for finance. And we repeated the model. The health conference attracted 500 people. The finance conference was just focused on leadership, and it was like 75 to 100. But yeah, it really served us well.
I was wondering if it strengthened Mad Pow's business overall, and it sounds like it definitely did. And we'll talk about what you're doing now, but it sounds like you're going to use that model again with your new company because you have a new conference coming up. What role has community building really played in your overall career trajectory?
Oh my gosh, yeah, it's planning an event is hard. It's not all like rainbows and butterflies. It's like I said, it's like a masochistic endeavor. It's like a labor of love. But
Yeah.
the reason why I do it is because I love the people in the community. Just like I told you, I love the people at MadPow. I love the people in the community. Talk about inspiration, like convening people who are like-minded or not to share their insights and their wisdom. And, they always say at conferences, the best conversations happen in the hallways. But
Totally.
just the energy around it and working toward that creates like a reason for doing things, like a buzz, a energy. It starts to take on a life of its own, and then it has an afterlife, if you will, or a half life, a second life, whatever you want to call it. So yeah, so right now, I missed running the conference, the Health Experience Design Conference. I did it for 11 years. I loved it. I missed it post Mad Pow. And so I had a friend who ran a conference at Kaiser Permanente on the West Coast, different network of people. I had been to his conference. He had been to my conference. He missed doing conferences too. And we said, why don't we do a conference together? So we founded the Design for Dignity conference a couple of years ago. We're in year 3. The theme is Dignified Futures, and it's exploring the intersection of health and social impact, looking at systems thinking, futures thinking, also digital experience design and service design, but taking an intersectional approach, like looking at social drivers of health, financial well-being, transportation, housing, employment, food as medicine. And so, yeah, I'm really looking forward to the next one.
Yeah, and I was reading the conference description and it says It's a call to reimagine how we design systems for social impact. And that's a big ambition. What do you mean by designing systems versus designing experiences or products?
Yeah, sure. My career progression was from graphic design to digital visual design to user experience design, which is what we started Mad Pow on. And then at Mad Pow, we started looking into experience innovation, the omni-channel experience, CX, service design, deeper ethnography. Then we evolved into behavior change design. So motivational psychology, behavior science, designing interventions to change real world behaviors. And then we started getting into futures thinking and systems thinking toward the end. And that's really what I love because it went from the visual media and the craft to as the medium to thinking about how do we design all the pieces and parts? Because when you get into it, it's like we could clean up this digital experience, but really it's the process or the policy that's the problem. And so let's do service design. And then once you did the service design, you're like, we can fix it at this company, but really it's the regulatory or the policy that's the problem. And so once you really start getting familiar with the problem spaces, you start realizing and stepping back and taking a new lens and realizing, oh, it's the system, it's how organizations work together, or it's the flow of money, or it's this policy. And so I started to get passionate about systems thinking, looking across the whole system to identify where can we zoom in to have an outsized impact. If we change one thing, how might we have an outsized impact across organizations as well?
So, systems thinking, it's really just a bigger umbrella that service design, all the rest would fit into. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. It's like you have the person at the center, right? And then you have their organization, then you have their employer and the government, like society as a whole. So yeah, it's taking that higher level view. And also like from a systems design perspective, looking at causal loops, systems loops, like how one thing affects the other. Because we're so busy oftentimes designing to alleviate symptoms as opposed to designing to prevent the problems from happening to begin with. So it's really looking at root cause analysis or causal loops instead of having systems that lead to downward spirals, having systems that lead to loops that raise everybody up.
And Dignified Futures is happening in March. Is that right?
Yeah, March 18th and 19th in Chicago.
In Chicago. And who should be thinking about attending?
Yeah, anybody in systems thinking, futures thinking, or design in health. And when I say health, nonprofit, community health, policymakers, public health, folks from insurance companies, pharmaceutical companies, health systems. We have a lot of folks coming from Medicaid organizations as well as federally qualified health centers. So basically anybody that cares about improving health in terms of the outcomes or the experiences.
Okay, I will definitely include a link in the show notes for anybody that's interested to please check it out. And I wanted to circle back to this time at Mad Pow before you actually had the acquisition. You were winning these big clients, you've closed deals with major companies and well known brands. And for consultants listening who are trying to land those bigger fish, when you're crafting an engagement with a new client, what are the most important questions you ask to win the work?
It's a great question. And I will say, I do feel it's harder now to break into organizations. They've clarified their vendor list. Sometimes if you're an independent, it's easier than if you're a small shop. Because an independent can be paid through like alternative means, because it all has to do with the budget classification. You can be viewed as like a subcontractor as opposed to an agency. It's like the dollars are in
Right.
different buckets. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? But in terms of getting into organizations and doing business with them, of course, networking and relationship building and being of service. But when you're talking about that initial conversation, my formula was just ask questions, like hearkening to human-centered design and research. Be a good researcher, ask questions about what they care most about, what they're trying to achieve, what they've already done, how they plan on getting there, what keeps them up at night, what they're most passionate about. My goal was to have the client talk for 90% of the call. It wasn't about, here's our fancy process, here's how we do things. The best calls were ones that were half hour, no PowerPoint. We did have to do ones that were the dog and pony show and people expected PowerPoints. But if you listen for the majority of the time and then say, I hear you saying that this is the most important thing. What if we did this or this? That could be helpful. Or even ask them, like, considering that you care about achieving this within that time frame and that we can offer ABC, how do you see us adding value? So almost to like ask them a question that makes them think of how they want to work with you as opposed to telling them how they want to work with you. Those types of things can help. A lot of companies are having layoffs right now. A lot of budgets for outsourcing are also impeded right now. I think also consultants are getting a bad rap as well. I think, especially I adopted this mentality when I was at United Healthcare. I was chief design officer there, and I had a team of 100 amazing designers.
Mhm.
And we needed that to be sticky with the business and understand the challenges we were trying to solve and get really good at working together and solving those challenges. But we also needed fresh outside thinking too, because when you're inside, you just stop becoming aware of all of the other ways people do things, all of the other things happening outside of your organization. So I think it's good to have a blend of internal strengths and talent and balance that with external perspectives.
Mad Pow was having this exponential growth. We're doing the conferences, landing these amazing clients, building this team. And then somewhere along the way, an acquisition conversation starts to happen. And I was wondering if you could tell me what led to the decision to sell Mad Pow? Was it the plan all along, or did circumstances drive it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when you're talking about an organization with all these employees and partners, they say more money, more problems, more employees, more problems. We had been through cycles and we made it through the financial crisis of 2009. And we made it through other crises where there'd be like a market downturn. We'd have to lay people off and we felt terrible. It was a miserable thing. But in order for the organization to survive, we needed to make those difficult decisions, but it was difficult and it took a toll. And I think it
Yeah.
stressed out the partners. And I think it was a combination of a few things. So seeing a convergence happening where large consultancies would be like, design matters, design is cool. We want design to be a point of competitive differentiation. So the Cognizants and the Sapiens and the Deloittes and the Wipros of the world would just acquire the smaller design firms, add them into their umbrella. And so those smaller design firms would help those big consultancies have that competitive differentiation and win and look cool, be cool in front of clients, and ultimately do great work. And also those big organizations wanted maybe some new MSAs that the smaller org had that they didn't have, right? So it was about competitive differentiation and organic growth, or Deloitte has a design firm. So, this other firm needs a design firm too. And so a lot of the firms ended up getting bought up, and it made it really difficult for smaller design firms to compete with a design firm that had been, purchased by Deloitte. You'd have 30 people working on an RFP over on the Deloitte side, and you'd have two people, like one to two on the Mad Pow side. So it became difficult. I don't golf. I can't golf with the CEOs of the Fortune 5s and whatnot. It just became difficult to compete with those ginormous organizations. That led to more revenue volatility, which would lead to more of the unfun stuff. And I think it was stressful too, managing a large organization for a long time. And so because design firms were desirable from an acquisition perspective, because it was harder to compete, because partners were getting stressed and things like that, we were like, okay, if we're ever going to do this, now might be the time. Now I'll take you back to the 2002, 2003 period. I had two kids and one on the way. I thought, hey, I'll grow a company for 5 years and then I'll be able to spend more time with my kids. Yeah, that was like 2002, 2003. We didn't sell till 2019, 16, 17 years later. So it was a totally different timetable. And mind you, I was a single mom, like entrepreneur, growing the business. There was a lot going on there. Ultimately, Mad Pow provided me with financial security to feed my family over the years. And it was an asset. And just like you look at the assets in your portfolio, you don't want to be foolish. You don't want to not sell and then the market tanks. Just like a stock, you want to sell when the market is conducive. And so we decided it was the right time to do that. Now, if I could go back in time, would I still make the same decision? Honestly, I'm not sure, because a lot of things happen that I would not have anticipated. My vulnerability is that I'm an optimist, and I always assume like, oh, it's going to be great. Things are going to go well. Like, I trust people. I believe what they say. In hindsight, there are a lot of learnings there.
Yeah, you mentioned to me that there were 4 partners to split the money with, personal circumstances like divorce, kids in college, and the financial reality just wasn't quite the golden parachute people imagine. And without getting into specific numbers or anything, and only what you're comfortable sharing, what did the financial reality of an acquisition look like? What do people misunderstand about what an acquisition actually means financially?
Yeah, and I'll just caveat all of this. First of all, first world problems. Second of all, like, I am personally reframing what is success, what does success look like, and encouraging others to do the same. I teach at Mass College of Art and Design. I get to experience vibrant, younger designers who are just setting out on the path of life and growing the company, getting acquired, getting whatever financial goal. I just saw a clip of you on TikTok. Funny, saying this.
Yeah.
Your version of success is not necessarily my version of success. When you look at it, at my core, I want my children to be thriving and I want to be there for them. Now, looking back over the course of time, because I was so focused on growing Mad Pow to provide the financial stability for my family that we did need, I missed out on those times. So I'm a big fan of life design and thinking about what do you actually want your life to be like and designing it that way. But you asked about financials. We'll get into that. Me personally, whatever my share was in the company, um, there was initial chunk, right? And then there was an earnout period of 3 years. And so we didn't get it like all at once. Uncle Sam like basically takes half straight up, right? Then according to my divorce agreement, I had to give 20% to my ex, and our divorce agreement also said that I had to fund our children's education. Um,
Mhm.
and after that, being responsible with retirement and such, there's not a ton left. And when you look
Right.
at it, and this is all the like good financial advice of live within your means. And if you get a raise, pretend you didn't and just save more and do all these financial smart things. Honestly, I feel like if most of us considered financial planning and being smart financially as a part-time job, we'd probably all be doing a lot better. So instead of slaving away at the day job, maybe just like doing a little, like having a job that isn't as stressful or all consuming.
Totally. Yeah.
Think about these, because if I had saved more money and invested it wisely, I could have probably ended up with the same egg that I had at the end. You can build toward that chunk incrementally over time if you set about the work of doing it and even see it as like a possibility. Um, so yeah, one of the themes explored at the Financial Experience Design Conference when we had it was this financial independence, retire early movement. These like crazy kids that live very frugally and save 75% of their income so that they can
Wow.
retire early. And for them, retirement isn't, I'm going to go play bingo. Retirement is, I am like liberated from the constraints. And rat race as a religion, I don't know that it's the best thing, to be honest. So the best thing wasn't the payout at the end of it, which is why I always thought we got into it. And again, I am grateful financially. It sustained my family. I was a single mother. I needed to put food on the table somehow. I'm grateful for that. But the best part of the journey and the part I miss the most is working with amazing people every day.
I really just appreciate that you're willing to talk about this publicly. And I think there are a lot of consultants listening right now who dream about that moment, the exit, the big payout. without really understanding what it actually looks like in practice. So thank you for just going into that. Mad Pow, it was like your baby, you know what I mean? That was
Mhm.
huge. And it was, synonymous with who you were. Letting go of that too, I can only imagine was just such an emotional thing. And just say, okay, that was one chapter. Now we're starting a new chapter. That in itself must be very emotional.
Oh, totally.
Yeah. Looking back, if you were advising someone who's building an agency with an exit in mind, what would you tell them to think about or plan for that you'd wish you'd known?
Yeah, sure. So there are ways that I learned about later to have employees of the agency own parts of the agency, or you step away if you have a trusted leadership team, you can step away and do something else, but the agency is still like running. So whether you convert it to being employee owned or you stay involved, I think there could have been ways to get some partners what they were looking for without necessarily going through the acquisition process. Now, of course, like I said, like rose-colored glasses, we liked the group that ended up acquiring us, and we thought, wow, these are like brilliant guys. We're going to learn from them. This can be a good thing. And from a culture perspective, it seemed like a fit. And then, of course, you hear the horror stories from other design agencies, and we're like, oh, that'll never happen to us. We'll be good. And then what do you know? It ends up happening. I feel honestly like I carry a lot of guilt for that because I wish that some of the things that ended up happening, like in hindsight, maybe they were avoidable, maybe they weren't. But now I look at how agencies are just struggling, and I'm like, okay, whether we were acquired, whether we weren't, it still would have been a challenge. And I view an agency like a star almost, where it might burn bright and then die out, but you're glad it happened because it was beautiful while it existed, kind of thing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And the mark on the industry is still there. I think Mad Pow, what it gave back to the industry is huge. The whole legacy of it. And every single person who worked there, I think, was so special and had a certain quality. You were very good. Your company as a whole, I think it's finding good talent and just creating a really good culture. So it was a beautiful thing. And after the sale of Mad Pow and your exit, you actually went back to work internally and became chief design officer at United Healthcare. And when I saw that, I was so shocked. I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe she's going back to work internally. And it was such a prestigious role. I was wondering what attracted you to it initially.
Yeah, sure. Post Mad Pow is like full blown existential crisis, right? Maybe it was my identity, and maybe that was a good thing. Maybe it wasn't a good thing. But it definitely was my baby. Also, like COVID was happening. I lost my mom. My kids were growing up and moving out. So there was a lot of change happening. And I was like, okay, what do I want to do next? I was like, do I write a book? Do I go get my master's degree? What do I do? And I love to be busy, and I love health, and I love design, and I wanted to make an impact at scale. And I wanted to learn about the challenges that our clients faced on the inside, so to speak. And the United Healthcare role, it was fluky in a way where I threw my hat in the ring. I never thought it would go anywhere, but it did. And I wanted to make an impact at scale. And boy, was it a learning curve going from a 70-person organization to a 400,000-person organization, from private to publicly traded to like a simple business model to like a matrixed organization where you need to manage up, down, sideways, and consider politics. I had a PhD in consulting, and I was like a second grader when it came to corporate politics. So there was a lot to learn. The funny part is after Mad Pow, I didn't think I could love again, meaning actually love a team of human beings as much as I did love the folks at Mad Pow. But it happened again. I fell in love with the team at United Healthcare. I had a team of 100 just like amazing creative souls who were there because they wanted to improve health. The mission of United Healthcare is to improve the health system and help make healthcare work better for everyone. And as we know, there's problems with the US healthcare system. There's problems with United Healthcare. There are amazing humans that work there, but the machine is broken, and not broken in that it functions, but there are serious opportunities to improve the situation. And the challenges, solving the challenges and leaning into finding ways to manifest the opportunities. I was really passionate about that. And that's why I joined the company. But I didn't last long because I'm not a good If something doesn't make sense to me, I want to figure out a way that it can be done better. Also, things changed a lot. My leader ended up moving on and I was reorged, and my new leader had a different mandate for me, and it was a lot to navigate. Also, I was in 20 half-hour meetings a day, and there were a lot of challenges. So for my own well-being, I decided to pass the baton to another leader and go back to consulting where I felt more at home and more confident. But I miss the team there. They were so phenomenal. And I wish maybe because I hear critique, a lot of people critique like design leaders. Oh, you're too sensitive, or you didn't wait long enough, or just hold on, or take 5 punches because on the 6th try, like it'll work. But what it came down to for me is that I couldn't betray my own ethics. I just couldn't. I just couldn't. And so I had to go.
Yeah, just a values misalignment. Yeah.
Yep.
So you left United Healthcare and started Beneficent. Am I saying that right? Beneficent Design?
Beneficent. Yeah, it's an English
Yes.
word.
Okay.
Means for the good of all.
Oh, I
And
love that.
so, yeah, and that's really where I want to focus my work is, again, that finding opportunities for outsized impact. I'm doing a lot of futures thinking and speculative foresight work in the public sector, for nonprofits, and for corporations, primarily in health and in finance, but cross industry. And I'm looking at helping organizations envision aspirational futures. Yeah, we have all these tools, we have AI, but where are we actually trying to go? What does that look like? And how do we paint the picture of that so that we can start tracking towards it and building consensus internally? And then I'm also using futures thinking to do de-risking of alternative futures and dark futures because there's so much uncertainty in the world and we truly do not know what is going to happen. The more we think about what could happen, the better our strategy will be. And so I'm using futures thinking in the realm of digital product, in customer experience, in business strategy, in the realm of policy making. I did a workshop with one of my colleagues in DC with a bipartisan group of junior congressional staffers to teach them human-centered design, systems thinking, and futures thinking so they could leverage that in the policymaking process. So really just trying to get the word out, teaching, workshopping, and doing project work for organizations so that they can better serve their constituencies.
And how are you approaching growth, or are you approaching growth differently this time around? Do you have a vision for Beneficent that is different than Mad Pow?
So what's different? Like I said, I talked about that creative abrasion. And in the early days of Mad Pow, my business partner and I would feed off of each other. He'd say X and I'd say, no, Y. But that was helpful because then I knew that I liked Y, and we'd come up with like Z together, so to speak. So meaning my brain is like collaborative, and I feel like through that collaboration, you get to better outcomes. So now that I'm on my own, I don't have that collaboration. I don't have that like accountability to another person. So it is hard to like self-motivate. I know all the recipes for like marketing and business development and all of those things. Like I know how to grow a company to the point where like I consult with small, not even small, like organizations from 1 million to 25 million on growth. Like I advise companies on growth. I know growth, but when it comes to doing the growth on my own for myself, they say that cobbler's kids have no shoes type of thing. I think too, like being later on in my career, like maybe I have the wisdom and the knowledge, but now I'm a little more like, "Woo," you know, I'm not as fearless in my old age, so to speak. So, um, a combination of things like there's only so many hours in the day, doing like rigorous prioritization and trying to do some things and know that I can't do all the things. But also post United Healthcare, I was trying to find my way and figure out what do I want to do? How do I want to do it? And I was letting the patterns and the themes emerge. But now I feel pretty confident in what I'm doing and the direction of things to the point where I think I can start to scale up growth activities. And right now I'm working with a stable of subcontractors and I'm relishing those relationships. Maybe I'll be able to grow a team over time, or maybe not. Maybe I'll just continue to be independent. Who knows? So my point is, I know the right things. I don't do the right things. Maybe soon I will do the right things. Question. They'll work. Maybe they won't. Who knows? Stay tuned.
I was curious if you had aspirations for employees or you're just going to see what happens where it takes you.
I would love to. One of the things I was really passionate about, and I think is really important now, is just I was talking about this with Chauncey Wilson one time, of people who are senior level, like so much wisdom, right? And proficiency. Folks that are just getting started, they have just such a different lens and they're inspiring. They look at the world differently. So right now, folks graduating from college, it's hard to get that entry level work. I'd love to create a mechanism where folks can come in, be mentored by senior levels, get work experience and move on. So like to have like the blend of junior, senior. I feel like we played with that a lot at Mad Pow and to varying degrees of success. But I'd like to really perfect that model.
And when it comes to where you're working, we were talking before about office space and you're renting office space in Portsmouth. And
Yeah.
I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit about that decision. Like, why do you need that physical divide between home and work for you?
I was just done working from home. Like, I am not a creature made for isolation. I need to get out of my house, like the stimulation of food and people and activities and hustle and bustle, having somewhere to go, having that sort of commute and that division
Mhm.
between work and home. At home, I have the dog barking, there's a delivery coming, there's dishes in the sink, there's laundry to be done. It was all very distracting. And I felt being alone, staying at home, it just kind of muddied all the waters and I didn't really feel good about it. Now that I go somewhere, I feel like I have a job I'm doing and I'm
Yeah.
going to it. And it helps
Uh-huh.
me focus. It helps me focus my effort because I do have ADHD. And so I have to find ways to manage that.
I recognize that I don't get out enough, and it would probably be helpful to work elsewhere. I did have an experience where I rented office space for 3 months, and I loved it. I felt so much more productive, and I had that feeling of it's left at the office, and now I'm home, and when I'm home, I'm home. But unfortunately, it was just really hard to justify the cost. And how do you think about that?
Honestly, like it's really hard. I think if I didn't have the cost, yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's worth it because I feel like I get a lot more done in terms of actual productivity and quality. But then I still go to coffee shops sometimes to work. So, eh, yeah, I think everybody will know for them like what's the best solution. Fortunately, this year I've had plenty of work, so I can afford the lease. But if next year I don't have as much work and I can't, I'll have to cross that bridge when I come to it.
Yeah.
So it's a luxury that helps me, and for as long as I can afford it, I'll keep doing it.
And like you said before, it might be that little bit of like pressure that motivates or,
Yeah. Yeah, no, the overhead, it does. It
yeah.
motivates you. I gotta pay these bills. I
Yeah.
have to do XYZ. So yeah, it does create some pressure there.
And that gives me something to think about because I really did like that time when I experimented there. But you also mentioned having ADHD and just being open about that. And I was wondering, how does ADHD show up in your work and how have you learned to work with it rather than against it?
Yeah, sure. And a lot of people maybe wouldn't admit it. In the past, now neurodiversity is certainly a more accepted thing, but it's almost, oh, people look at it like, oh, it's a deficit or it's something you have to compensate for. You work really hard to like mask or appear like normal, quote unquote, as though anyone is normal. But I do view it as just a difference and even a superpower. I can hyper focus on things. And I think that has aided me for sure. And on the attention deficit side, when my mind wanders, I'm thinking about other things and other patterns, and my brain is exploring. But then I bring it back to what's happening. And I feel like that leads to creativity. And
Sure.
somehow like, my brain is synthesizing things. But I have had to figure out ways to make my life work, so to speak. So always putting things in the same place, trying to have a structured routine, writing down everything that I have to do and planning out my days. Whenever I'm feeling overwhelmed, making a list and making that plan. So there are certain things I do have to do to try to manage it so that I can be productive. I had tried medication in the past, and goodness, I was so productive when I was on that medication, but the side effects were really not worth it for me. So I just came up with hacks that just helped me. And I have actually before, when I was still interviewing and I wasn't sure if I was going to independent consult or not, I just wasn't sure, do I want a job or do I want to stay independent? I interviewed, and one comment, I only went on a couple of interviews, but on one of them, the person said, "You look to the left a lot." And they used that as a sign that I wasn't paying attention. But when I look to the left, my left,
Yeah.
it helps my brain think. I
Mhm.
maintain eye contact while also thinking. So I
Right.
literally have to look away. But they saw that as, oh, that's different. You're weird. There's something wrong, as opposed to being open to, that's just how my brain works.
Wow. Well, I'm so glad that you're talking about this because I know it helps others. And I'm just so sad to hear that people would think that because whenever I talk with you, my mind is always blown by just how you're very well spoken. You always have a lot to say in a very clear way. And I'm always just blown away by the way your mind works because you're just to me, you're just firing in all cylinders and just go, go, go. And I'm like, damn, where does she get her energy? And how in the world does she do this? And managing everything and still just, you always sound on point to me. I don't know, but it's good to know that you found hacks that work for you to make sure that is a superpower and not something that holds you back, because I don't see it doing that in any way at all.
Oh, thanks for saying that, Kyle, and
Yeah.
it means a lot because sometimes I worry if I'm too much and people run in the other
No,
direction.
no.
Take your compliment.
No, in fact, very much the opposite, very impressive. You know what? This brings up a memory for me. When I first met you, I went to the Mad Pow office, which was, I think, off Dalton Street in Portsmouth at the time. It was a very different office than when you guys had so many employees. And I walked in, you were having a client call, your eyes were closed, and you were talking with your eyes closed, and you were it was as if you were reading something. It was so brilliant. And you were just off the cuff, just talking about your clients. This is the services we have. And I'm like, oh my God, she's brilliant. And it's whatever you have to do to get into that zone, do it.
Yeah,
That's what.
it definitely can be some kind of weird quirks to get things moving in my brain, but yeah, I love creative exploration, and that's something I wanted to touch on, the passion and leaning in, especially for a lot of people who are looking for jobs or looking for clients. They're like, "Oh, do you have any tips?" And a lot of people are like, "Do you have work? Do you have a job?" But I feel like the world is your oyster when you really get excited about a certain problem space, when you really get curious about something and you really truly want to solve it. And then interactions with people aren't transactional and kind of, what can you do for me? It's more, let's explore this together. And then the exploration is exciting. People wanted to continue, and you get to, oh, is there a there? And could we get there together kind of thing? And it's about something more than ourselves. I was inspired by a Dignified Futures speaker last year who looks at futures thinking through a histological perspective, meaning let's look at history, spot patterns, and then play that into the future. But he was recognizing that our descendants did work that got us to where we are today in the present moment, and their work wasn't done. And now we carry their work forward. And then after us, that work will continue and others will pick up that work. And all we can do in the moments we have here is try to continue that work in a positive direction. And so when you view it as, I'm part of a movement, I'm part of a group of people who are brick by brick, action by action, trying to move things in a new and positive direction, exploring, making messes, making mistakes, but keeping on being curious and convening and learning and doing and making and reflecting, it becomes a cool thing.
Yeah, and you're carrying that baton, in my mind, really leading it in a lot of ways. And you mentioned futures thinking multiple times here, and you've been giving talks on it, and especially about talks about how UX will need to change in the age of AI. How do you think the work we do as UX consultants needs to evolve?
Yeah, definitely. There's AI accelerationists who believe AI is the way, it's going to solve all our problems. And then doomers who are like, it's going to lead us down the tubes and it's going to be awful and take all our jobs, et cetera. Now, as a futurist, I know that any of those things could happen. And maybe all of those things could happen, like the good, the bad, and the ugly. So from a UX perspective, though, I'm trying to take a pragmatic approach to it where, yes, AI might do more of the craft. I was a graphic designer, formerly trained in college, and we used to use X-Acto knives and pencil and paper. And then we moved into computer graphics. And then it was motion and internet and mobile and AI. So I see things differently. Like we're in a messy moment of reinvention, but our role as designers to figure out how to adapt and apply technology to solve human and organizational problems is still what we can do. It's still the reason why we're here. The only thing we need to do is lean into not the kind of stringent labels and definitions of what we call things that had been established and enabled us to be more structured and scale, like as a user experience industry. But if you think about organizations across humanity, across civilization, there have always been people thinking about problems, thinking about solutions, trying things, iterating, understanding what people think, synthesizing the information, collaborating, facilitating, ideating, like being creative, all the things. And so I think designers, if we think about what we really love to do, maybe it's not about the tool set. Maybe it's not about the specificity of the process. Maybe it's about really that curiosity, that orchestration, that collaboration, and that creativity. And so, how do we apply those things to designing a world that leverages AI in a positive way? To think about the ethics that we need to uphold and envision that hopefully we can abide by. And yeah, figure out how organizations can apply AI, figure out how we can use AI in our jobs. But so I like to be skeptical and optimistic at the same time. I don't want to have AI doing all my tasks at work because then I'm just a button pusher and my brain
Right.
will start to rot. And AI work slop, like obviously isn't helpful to anyone. And but also if I use AI like a colleague, how might I use AI as a colleague? And how might AI introduce new things like a living research model where research is constantly happening on big data sets and there are synthetic personas doing secret shopping and evaluating experiences and generating insights and coming up with hypotheses. And you have sort of like a closed loop innovation hub happening that you can tap into and interact with. So we're going to have to think about things in new ways. We're going to have to come up with new processes, new titles. We're going to have to maybe lean into business and technology roles again, like we used to back in the day before we had our own precious discipline.
Yeah, this is an interesting time to say the least, for certain. And things are definitely changing moment to moment, it feels.
Yeah.
So now that we're towards the end of our time together, I just wanted to wrap up with just some rapid fire questions here.
Sure.
In your opinion, what makes a consultant good?
I think a consultant is good if they know the types of people they want to work with, the types of challenges they want to work on, if they're listening to their clients, setting expectations and meeting those expectations. Those would be the kind of core principles, I would think.
And what's one of the best pieces of business advice you've ever received?
Get to know fast, meaning waiting has a cost. So get people to say no if they're going to say no so that you can kind of like move on and find that yes.
Yes, I have to agree completely. I've read something on this, like getting the quick no. It's such a gift to get that and stop wasting your time. I can't stand it when you have to wait forever just for the next. Great. That's such great advice. So, where can people learn more about your work, connect with you, or find out about Dignified Futures?
I'm on LinkedIn, of course, Amy Heymans, and my organization is Beneficent Design on the interwebs. And Dignified Futures is dignifiedfutures.com. where you can learn more about the conference and hopefully join us to attend. It truly is an amazing event.
I'm so excited to learn more about it, and I hope I can attend this year in March. So thank you so much, Amy, for spending the time with me today and just being candid about your experience. What a journey, really. It's amazing. It's been amazing to watch you, to be able to work with the companies that you make, and I'm just so grateful for all your time.
Thanks so much, Kyle. You remind me of Barbara Walters. You asked the hard questions in a very graceful way.
Good. I hope it was enjoyable, not painful.
Yeah, no, it's great. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. Take care.
You too. All right, that wraps up this episode. Thanks for joining me. So, do you have a topic or a question that you would like us to explore on a future episode of the UX Consultants Lounge? Perhaps there's an anonymous consulting story you want to submit. If so, click on the link in the show notes to submit your story or question from the podcast website. Until next time, keep that consultancy going. I can't wait to have you back at the lounge for our next episode.